and welcome to the latest installment of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, reading my writing to make the pandemic palatable. A while back, I read Cayo Hueso, A Tale of Cassie Weirdness Magnet, which I read in 5 installments over the course of 1 week. That was a big, massive, epic story involving Norse gods and active ghosts and all sorts of crazy-ass stuff. The story I'm going to read for you now is called God of Blunder. It is a follow-up. As you probably noticed throughout these readings, the Tales of Cassie Weirdness Magnet are urban fantasy tales in Key West, and several Norse gods are among the many supporting characters. We've already seen Odin and Loki and Sigyn and KRAD, and in this story, we will introduce a new one. You can probably guess who it is by the title, and if you can't, you'll find out soon enough. Anyway, this picks up right where Cayo Hueso left off, so without further ado, a story I wrote specifically for the RAGNAROK and ROLL collection, God of Blunder. There was a hush over Mayor Fred's saloon as Ihor and Jana helped Bobby Malevsky onto the stage. Bobby wore her trademark plain white t-shirt and blue shorts. Her left leg was covered from the knee downward with a plaster cast. As she sat on the provided stool, Jana hopped up onto the stage. She handed Bobby her left-handed Les Paul electric guitar. Ihor turned to head back to tending bar, but Bobby called out after him. "Hey, can I get a beer?" "Like hell, girl. You're on what, Percocet? Darvocet?" "Well, Perks. What's the big—" "No chance. You're cut off. And I already told Adina and Mira that if they get you any booze, I'm going to fire their asses." Ihor then continued back to the bar, while Bobby gave him a pissed-off look before turning her attention to tuning up. I was sitting at my usual table by the ficus tree that Mayor Fred's was built around, and as Ihor passed me, I got his attention. "Aren't you being a little hard on her? I broke my arm once back in San Diego, and I still had a beer or two to wash down the painkillers." "Yeah, and you've got about 8 inches of height, and fuck knows how much body weight on her." "Shit, her BMI is in negative numbers, for fuck's sake." Body mass index was one of those bullshit weight measurements that always pissed me off because doctors kept telling me that mine was too high, even though I'm a 5'11" woman with boobs and hips. There's only so low my weight's gonna get, you know? But Ihor had a point about Bobby. She was only 5'2", and had the minimum amount of body fat you could have and still be at all identifiable as female. I considered and rejected telling Ihor that she'd spent most of the previous day drinking quite a bit of beer amidst the painkillers at her family's Thanksgiving shindig and didn't seem worse for the wear. He was the guy responsible for the bar. I couldn't blame him for being cautious. Yesterday, Bobby was at her home if something went screwy. Tonight, she was in Ihor's house, and he wasn't going to take any chances. While Bobby was tuning, Jana was arranging the pedals in such a way that Bobby could still step on them with her good foot. I thought she was out of her mind for playing so soon after breaking her leg. Part of that was guilt. She broke it while helping me, my twin brother, and 3 Norse gods stop a psychotic, mass-murdering ghost. Mostly, though, it was worry that someone as active on stage as Bobby would go nuts having to play sitting down. I was also worried about the show, generally. Jana was mostly behind the keyboards, and when she played guitar, she didn't move around that much. And Ginny Blake, a.k.a. Sigyn, one of the aforementioned Norse gods, was behind the drum kit. As for Chet Smith, well, you know the stereotype that bassists are automatons who just stand on stage and never move? They used Chet to illustrate that stereotype. Bobby was the one who had the most stage presence, despite being the smallest person up there. She was constantly moving about the stage, playing her guitar with passion always. I kind of figured it was her way of compensating for her size, but it worked. Even though 3 of 1812's 4 members took turns singing lead, Bobby was, in many ways, the front person. However, Jana had texted me to make sure that I was there for the beginning of the set, because, as she put it, "We're opening with Bobby's 'fuck you, I don't care about my legs' set." My curiosity was, to say the least, piqued. Once Bobby's guitar was in tune, she looked around. Ginny was ready at the drum kit, Chet had tuned up his Ibanez bass, and Jana had tuned her own Gibson electric guitar, which meant they were opening with a 2-guitar song that had no keyboards. Bobby gave Ihor a nod, and he said over the PA, "All right, ladies and gentlemen, hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. And now it's back to the routine. Put your hands together for 1812! Mayor Fred's was pretty full, with lots of tourists who were spending their Thanksgiving weekend in Key West. Some of them were looking funny at the guitarist with the busted leg, wondering exactly what kind of show they'd get. Then Bobby and Jana nodded at each other, and slammed into the opening chords of AC/DC's Back in Black. Bobby also sang lead on that, her sharp soprano fitting nicely into Brian Johnson's lead vocal from the original. And man, did she kill it on the guitar solo. The place burst with an explosion of applause, but the band didn't even wait for it to die down. Jaina went to the keyboards, and Ginny started the rat-tat-tat opening of Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll, which Bobby also sang, and she slammed through guitar on. When she sang the final lonely, 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 lonely a cappella, and then took a great dramatic pause before time, I got goosebumps. Bobby took a break from melody singing as she started up the guitar riff that opened the Rolling Stones' Gimme Shelter. Chet's deep bass provided the lead for that one, but Bobby sliced through the harmonies and yet another killer guitar solo. She was always good, but she just basically took over 3 great riffs by Angus Young, Jimmy Page, and Keith Richards and made them her own. After Gimme Shelter, Bobby leaned her left wrist on the strings, and I grinned. It was Waddy Wachtel's turn to be supplanted by a short, skinny, blonde chick in a Key West bar. Bobby sang this one too, Edge of 17 by Stevie Nicks. Half the bar was on their feet. Several people were dancing in the area directly in front of the stage. Everyone was cheering and screaming and yelling, and I looked down to realize that I hadn't touched my beer since the first chord of Back in Black. You gotta understand, 1812 has been the house band at Mayor Fred's for a bunch of years now. Except for 2 breaks, in April, when they were between drummers, and in the summer, when they were in Mississippi, recording tracks as the backup band for John Robertson's last CD, they'd been there every Thursday through Sunday night, and I'd seen most of their performances since I first arrived in Key West 16 months ago. I hadn't thought there was a hell of a lot they could do to surprise me at this point. Holy shit, was I wrong. To say they were on fire tonight was to give fire way too much credit. I gulped down about half my beer as Ginny started another drum roll, one slower than rock and roll, but only a little bit. This time it was Sweet's Ballroom Blitz, which Chet and Jaina split the lead vocals on. Chet did the quieter first half of the verses, with Jaina taking over the louder second half. All 3 sang the chorus in magnificent harmony. By now, I was exhausted, and I was just sitting. Luckily, they slowed it down a bit, with Jaina starting the piano bit that began Warren Zevon's Werewolves of London, followed by Jaina and Bobby both donning matching black Takamine acoustic guitars for a stellar rendition of Bob Dylan's Tangled Up in Blue. For that, Chet, Jaina, and Bobby each sang 3 verses, with the 3 of them singing every 2 lines of the final verse. The 2 guitars rang out through the saloon. So much for my worry about Bobby retaining her front person status. They closed the first set with Till the Walls Come Tumbling Down, a Jay Giles band number that gave Jaina a chance to remind everyone how awesome she is. She snarled out the lyrics while playing a mean-ass piano. But it ended with another killer guitar solo while Chet and Bobby belted the "Ooh yeah!" that alternated with each line of the chorus. The crowd whooped and cheered louder than the guitar solo, and half a dozen people moved to assist Jaina in helping Bobby off the stage. I was sitting alone, so I stayed put. Bobby had plenty of help, and I didn't want to lose the table. Ginny handed Bobby down her crutches, and the 2 of them slowly worked their way over to me. Chet had already gone into the men's room, and Jaina was outside smoking. Adina came over with 2 beers and a bourbon. She put one of the beers in front of Bobby and smiled. "This one's on the house." Bobby, Ginny, and I all looked over at the bar, and Ihor gave Bobby a thumbs up, mouthing the words, "You earned it." Grabbing the pint glass, Bobby gulped down about half of it. "Shit, I needed that." I regarded her with amusement. She was just as sweat-soaked as she usually was after a set, staying seated notwithstanding. That was fucking amazing. 2 tourists passed by the table. "You guys were awesome!" "Thanks!" Bobby raised her pint glass. "Yeah, that set didn't suck." After a 20-minute break or so, they headed back up. The bar was emptier. A bunch of people left after the set was over, which always happened, but the musicians really needed breaks in order to play for 5 to 6 hours. As they were tuning up, a group of 5 tourists came in. I recognized them from both the Bottroff House Bed and Breakfast, where I lived and worked part-time, and also the dive shop, where I worked part-time as a dive master. I checked them in when they'd arrived on Tuesday afternoon, and recommended both diving at Sea Cliffs, I took them out on Wednesday, and seeing 1812 at Mayor Fred's. It was 3 men and 2 women, all college students from Baltimore. 2 of the guys, DeAndre and Anwan, and one of the girls, Drayvon, were siblings. Drayvon's boyfriend was named Steve, and DeAndre's girlfriend was Rosita. "So this is the place, huh, Cass?" DeAndre asked as they came in. "Yep. Good timing, too. The second set's about to start." Steve wiped some sweat off his shiny, bald head. "Wouldn't have found this place without you telling us." "Yeah, well. One of the things I liked about Mayor Fred's was that it was around the corner from Duval Street, which meant the average tourist had to think to come here. Most just wandered up and down the main drag without ever venturing down the side roads like Green Street, which worked for me because that limited the tourists to the one who either had heard of the place and knew what to expect, or to ones who actually made an effort. Rosita was looking up at the wall, to which hundreds of business cards had been stapled over the years, as were assorted other things. "Is that a bra?" I followed her gaze to the bra that had been stapled to the wall right near the merchandise table, and grinned. I didn't even notice that stuff anymore. "Yep." DeAndre gave his girlfriend a toothy grin. "You want to hang yours, baby doll?" "Fuck you." But she was smiling as she said it. The table behind mine had been abandoned, and it was slightly bigger, but only had 3 chairs. I gave the quintet my 2 spares, since Bobby and Jenny wouldn't need them for a while, and I knew that Special Agent Rance Demetrigian, my occasional companion for 1812 shows, wasn't going to be here tonight, as he was still on a case. As Anwan took one of the chairs over, he gave me a huge smile and said, "Thanks a lot, Cassie." He was leaning over, giving me a very nice view of his muscular arms. He was wearing a sleeveless t-shirt. Plus his smile could have powered the whole island. "My pleasure." And I meant it. I found myself remembering what a good diver he was. I'd gone under with him as his buddy, since the 2 couples paired off. But I hadn't really noticed him before. At the B&B, I was exhausted from stopping that psychotic ghost, and at Eclipse, I was focused on working. But now? Yeah, he was hot. And the only unattached guy in the group. I decided to go for it before he went away with the chair. "Hey, Anwan, where's your girlfriend?" The smile fell, and I was suddenly sorry I asked. "Bitch broke up with me. Week before Thanksgiving, and she goes telling me she wants a..." He cut himself off and looked away. "Never mind." "Oh, come on, you can tell me." I gave him my best smile. "If you can't tell your dive master, who can you tell?" Then that got the smile back, which was the idea. Then he shook his head. "Nah, she was just all, you're too physical and shit." I raised an eyebrow. "Too physical?" "Yeah, well, she's a shorty, you know what I mean?" He indicated the stage with his head. "Like that little girl up there with the cast up. Like the little girl with the cast up there. Guess you don't like her men strong." "Too bad for her." "I certainly do." The smile widened. "All right." And then he headed to his table. After about 7 or 8 songs, they all got up and left. Drayvon said, "We're going to bounce. We're going to check out the Hog's Breath and maybe hit one of the dance clubs." "Oh, you should stay." I admit I was looking at Anwan as I spoke. "Nah, I mean, they're good and shit, but we need to be dancing." Should have been here for the first set. 1812 had been a bit more low-key for the second set, going for songs that were still intense and rockin', but not really toe-tappers that would get people on the dance floor. "It's all right. We catch you tomorrow?" "You bet." They had signed up for my Saturday afternoon dive. As I watched them leave, Anwan turned and gave me one last bright smile. I figured I had another 2 hours to spend with him in a skin-tight neoprene suit, which wouldn't suck. Maybe I'd get the opportunity to find out what too physical meant exactly. Another group took over their table, only there were 6 of them, so they had to steal another chair. Bobby leaned into her mic. "This one's for Cass." Uh-oh. I braced myself, and Bobby slammed into the opening chords for Holy Diver. Then I just laughed. Well, hell, I am a goddess and a diver, so why not? Making it even funnier, Chet sang lead, and he was the only band member who didn't know the specifics of my being a fate goddess. As Bobby did the final descending chords of the Dio song, this big guy, who made Anwan look like a 90-pound weakling, walked up to the table holding a chair. He was close to 7 feet tall, seriously, wearing a plain white t-shirt that was straining against his bulging muscles. His red hair was shaved down to a buzz cut, but he had a thick red beard. Seriously, he looked like every bear I'd ever met. And given that Key West had a homosexual population equivalent to that of San Francisco, there were quite a few bears, though a lot more twinks. He wore cargo shorts, and, oddly, there was a small ball-peen hammer hanging off a loop on his belt. Putting the chair down so the back was facing my table, he straddled it, leaning his redwood-sized arms on the chair's back. "So, this is the mighty Dees who saved us all!" I just stared at him for a second, both impressed and appalled by the audacity, and not at all comfortable with his identifying me as a Dis. About 7 months ago, I found out I was one of the Disir, a Norse fate goddess, which is why weird shit has been happening to me all my life in general, and why I was helping Norse gods stop crazy ghosts in particular. Only a few people knew about it. I told Rance, Bobby, and Jaina. Ginny already knew, being a Norse goddess herself, ditto Loki and Odin, obviously. In fact, Odin was the one who told me right before he conscripted me to help stop Loki from destroying the world. And my parents and twin brother knew, the latter being a Dis himself. But that didn't explain how this asshole knew. Who the fuck are you, and why the fuck are you sitting at my table? The bear threw his head back and laughed to the ceiling, loud enough that it briefly drowned out 1812's rendition of Bang a Gong. Everyone around me looked at us funny. Seriously, who the fuck? You were there when the Allfather died, were you not? I just sat there with my mouth hanging open. I had no idea how to respond to this, although I seriously considered throwing my beer in his face, before rejecting the notion as a waste of a perfectly good drink. Odin, the Allfather of the Aesir, died. Sort of, when we stopped the ghost. Alright, listen. I don't know who— You must come with me this evening! There is much to do! He held out one massive hand. I looked at it like it was diseased. Sorry, I don't know where that hand's been. A huge grin spread behind the thick beard. More places than you could possibly imagine, beautiful Dis. Now, shall we be away from this place to discuss to somewhere quieter, where our business may be discussed? We don't have any business. Look, I'm not sure what your game is, but in about 7 seconds, you're going to find out how good I am with a dive knife. I didn't actually have my dive knife on me, but I was hoping he wouldn't call my bluff. That just widened the asshole's grin, only now he had a lascivious look in his eyes. Maybe he wasn't a bear. Excellent! You have spirit! That will serve you well! While I was trying to figure out how to manhandle someone who was twice my size, Adina came over. Can I get you something, big guy? Before I could say that he wasn't going to be sitting here long, he barreled forward. Ah, of course! Before we adjourn, there must be a toast! 2 pints of the same ale that she is drinking, and a fresh one for her as well. Adina's eyes grew wide. 2 pints? The toast is for the recent death of my father. I squinted at him. Son of a fucking bitch. Oh, I'm so sorry. Adina's face got all scrunchy. I'll bring those 3 pints right away. She went off, and I glowered at him. Odin's son, knows who I am, knows what I am, red hair, carrying a hammer. Should have figured it out right off. You're Thor. Of course I am. He regarded me with confusion, apparently surprised that I'd only just put it together. Odin's beard woman! Who else would I be but Thor, Odin's son, god of the storm? Bang a Gong ended, and the bar filled with more raucous applause. I noticed that Ginny was looking right at my table with a murderous expression on her face. Bobby leaned into the mic again. We got 2 separate requests for this next one? Tapping on a pedal, she started in on the opening chorus for I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Ginny was still staring daggers at our table. I wondered what the history was there. Adina brought the 3 pints, putting 2 in front of Thor and 1 in front of me. Thor lifted one of the pints, and I decided, what the hell, and raised my almost empty one. To Odin, the All-Father, ruler of the 9 worlds, my father, and the greatest god that ever lived. I recalled what Loki and Ginny said when we did a similar toast yesterday at Bobby's. Skull! We clanked our pints together, Thor's glass hitting mine hard enough that for a second I thought they were both going to shatter. As we did so, thunder rumbled in the air and I caught a flash of lightning through the open roof of Mayor Fred's. I sipped the rest of my beer, which was less than a third of the glass. Thor guzzled the entire pint in one shot. Yowza. Slamming down the now empty pint glass, Thor laughed. Aha, lovely Dis, you are fortunate to have fought alongside my father in battle and been there for another triumphant death. This is the second time someone told me that Odin had died before. How many triumphant deaths has Odin had exactly? Thor grinned. Far too many to keep track of. That's the task of the Norns. Or you, actually, magnificent Dis, for fate is your purview. Looking around furtively, I said, okay, look, my name's Cassie. I'd rather you didn't call me Dis like that, or any other way. It wasn't quite as annoying as Loki calling me Little Dis, as he liked to do. The funny thing is, I wouldn't have minded as much coming from Thor, since compared to him, I was little. Hell, compared to him, aircraft carriers were little. And yeah, okay, it was nice to be called lovely, beautiful, and magnificent, but still, we were in public. He slammed a hand on the table, and it jumped. That got us our second set of funny looks, only more of them this time. Very well! To you, beautiful Cassie, the Dees who averted Ragnarok. I picked up my full pint. You know about that, huh? My father informed me when last we spoke at midsummer. You are to be commended, lovely Cassie. Loki Laufey's son is a trickster of the highest order. Tell me about it, I muttered. It also looked like I was getting the complimentary adverbs no matter what, and I was honestly okay with that. I'm supposed to be keeping an eye on him, make sure he doesn't cause trouble. I've already failed at that once. Wait, the foul trickster is no longer imprisoned? I shook my head. In fact, I'm surprised he's not here to drool over Ginny some more. Again, Thor pounded on the table, but this time it almost fell over, and I practically fell out of my chair. Curse his infernal shifty eyes and his damnable hide! When I see him, I'll pull out his entrails and strangle him with them! Give me some advance warning, I'll sell tickets. Thor just stared at me for a second, then threw his head back and brayed a laugh that made his previous one sound like a titter. Now it wasn't just people around us looking like we were nuts. Over at the bar, both Ihor behind it and Larry sitting at it gave me a what the fuck expression. I just shrugged sheepishly. 1812 had, at that point, finished the Stones song. Jaina had put on an acoustic guitar and started strumming the rhythm chords for You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. But enough! Thor declared once he was done scaring the tourists with his guffaws. We must away to our business, post-haste! He reached into the pockets of one of his cargo shorts and tossed a huge pile of money onto the table, most of which were dollar coins. I shook my head. What is it you guys have against paper money? Thor ignored my question and got to his feet, once again holding out his hand. Will you accompany me, magnificent Cassie of the Disir? Staring at the hand that looked like a giant slab of meat with fingers, I kept going back and forth in my head about what to do. The last time a Norse god came to me with a great mission, it was to save the world. I still wasn't 100% recovered from twisting that crazy ghost's fate so that it would stop killing people. But I had to admit to being intrigued. I got up, pointedly not taking his hand. I still didn't know where it had been. All right, let's go. Casting one glance back at the stage to wave goodbye to the band, I got a lascivious smile from Jaina, a quick smile from Bobby, she was singing, utter indifference from Chet, and an even more murderous gaze from Ginny. We stepped out onto green, and Thor just stopped moving. Where is this mission exactly? Remembering the comics I'd read as a kid, I took a step back and held up both hands, as if to ward him off. We are not flying. Of course not! We are simply awaiting my chariot! After being told I was a Dis, I dive-bombed into everything I could find out about Norse mythology. And I knew about Thor's chariot. Flying wasn't looking so bad. Alright, there is no fucking way I'm getting in a chariot pulled by two goats named Teethbearer and Teethgrinder. We can go get my truck. A car came blazing down green, nearly running down a couple of tourists. And yes, after living here for 16 months, I could tell a tourist on sight. It came to a screeching halt in front of Mayor Fred's, right under the no standing anytime sign. There was nobody inside it. Once it was idling in front of me instead of blasting down the street, frightening pedestrians, I recognized it as a Pontiac Tempest GTO, which went by a very particular nickname. I just stared at Thor. A goat? Seriously? He grinned again. One must change with the times, mighty Cassie. Apparently. I liked lovely, beautiful, and magnificent better, but mighty wasn't bad. Thor moved around to the driver's side. Come, we will ride on I can't pronounce this. We will ride in Tangjuster. What, not Tangristner? The car is Tangjuster only on my own day, as well as Odin's and Freya's days. Thor squeezed himself into the front seat. It is Tangristnir the other 4 days. I nodded as I did likewise and fastened my seatbelt. He was talking about Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and calling the goats that pulled his old chariot by their Old Norse names. This is a 64, right? From his position behind the wheel, he regarded me with a look of respect. Well spotted, lovely Cassie! I noticed that his seat was back as far as possible, and also that he hadn't fastened his seatbelt. Yeah, well, I used to be a car nut. Why for used to be? He threw the car into gear and gunned the accelerator for the 30 feet to the intersection with Duval. Then he stomped on the brake and screeched around the corner. I found myself reaching for the Jesus bar, but the 64 goat was a convertible and didn't have one. Yeah. I closed my eyes, not wanting to actually see it when he ran someone down on the crowded thoroughfare of Duval on a Friday night. Since I was a little kid, was always seriously into cars. Had models, matchbox cars, the works. That was how I met my ex-boyfriend, Greg, back in college. We were both gibbling over the 66 Dodge Dart one of the other students had. It was the two-door postless model that they only did that year. A fine vehicle! I winced as he just missed clipping a pair of co-eds. Yeah. Our first date was to go to the San Diego International Auto Show. Anyhow, he cheated on me and I caught him. What's worse, when I walked in on him, lip-locked with that little bitch, he just blithely introduced me as his friend. And did you smite the varlet for his impertinence? No, but I'm totally stealing that way of describing it the next time I tell this story. Anyhow, I may have thrown something at him, and I never spoke to the shitheel again. Kind of lost interest in cars after that. Thor made a sharp left onto Eaton Street. We passed the Bottroff house on the left. At this point, my stomach had been left behind and was probably going back up to my room, and went careening down the less well-traveled street, taking it to the end, then zoomed right onto Palm Avenue, which intersected with Route 1. As we drove over the bridge onto Stock Island, I asked, "So, where are we going again?" "Our mission will take us to the isle that you refer to as Summerland Key." "And what exactly will we be doing there?" Thor just grinned. Suddenly, I was very conscious of the fact that, contrary to every instinct I'd built up over 26 years of being female, I had just gotten into a car with a strange, aggressive man whom I'd just met. "Look, I got enough of the cryptic-ass shit from your old man. Will you just tell me what we're doing?" "Fulfilling your wildest dreams, lovely Cassie. Consider it your reward for the role you have played in protecting the world and serving the Aesir in these dark times." I threw up my hands. Why is it that when I ask you fucknuts for clarity, you just get more cryptic? And what dark times are you talking about? As he barreled down the overseas highway as fast as traffic would allow, Thor spoke in a graver tone than he'd used since he sat down next to me. "There are very few of us left, Cassie. Myself, Loki, Sigyn, Gerard, Tyr, the sons of Ivaldi, Vali." He shook his head. "Asgard is lost to us. The 9 worlds reduced to a story told to children." Then he shook his head a second time, grinning through that ridiculous beard again. "But enough of this maudlin mewling like old women." I winced at maudlin mewling, but said nothing, as Thor zoomed over the bridge from Cudjoe Key to Summerland, and a few minutes later swerved right onto West Shore Drive. After that road turned into Ocean Drive, he slammed right onto a dirt road for about a quarter mile, which led to a small cabin. This was starting up what my Uncle Harry used to call a queasy feeling in my gizzard. Thor screeched the goat to a halt just outside the cabin. Unfolding himself, he got out of the car. "Come, lovely Cassie! The greatest adventure you will ever encounter awaits you within those walls." I stood next to the goat, facing the rather bland-looking cabin. Couldn't make out many details, as it was dark. The only light came from the goat's headlights, which were now out. "Okay, you do realize that I've corralled dragons, stopped nixies, twisted the fates of ghosts and immortals, banished demons, and stopped the end of the world, right?" Thor was now standing in the doorway, fumbling with a set of keys he'd removed from one of the many pockets in his cargo shorts. "I'm aware of that. Well, perhaps not all of the specifics, but you are a dece." "Right, and what I'm saying is my great adventure bar is pretty fucking high." "Rest assured, this will be greater than all of them." Thor got the door open, and it swung inward. "Come! Enter, and be amazed!" The gizzard was on overdrive. But this was Thor, for crying out loud. Odin's son, and one of the great figures of Norse myth. Hell, he had his own comic book and movie series, sort of. So I went in. The cabin had a big living room with a galley kitchen against the back wall. On the left and right were doorways to bedrooms. There was a couch in the middle of the living room, making it look just like a sitcom apartment. Seriously, on television, they always put the couch in the middle of the floor, and I've seen maybe one dwelling in real life that did that before now. And an easy chair next to it. As soon as I closed the door behind me, Thor took his shirt off. I kind of stared for a second, not entirely believing what I was seeing, until he undid his pants. Then I held up both hands and slowly backed myself toward the door while trying desperately to remember what he did with the keys to the goat. "Whoa there, motherfucker! What the hell do you think you're doing?" He gave me a perplexed look. I've found that the act of lovemaking is greatly facilitated by the removal of clothing. You have got to be fucking kidding me. What did you think I was bringing you here for, mighty Cassie? You have served the Aesir well, and you deserve the finest reward we can offer. He started to undo the shorts, and I cried out, Stop it! Why have you not removed your clothes? He sounded genuinely confused. Let me put this succinctly. I reached behind my back and put my hand on the doorknob to the front door. I also tried not to hyperventilate. If you and I were the last two people on Earth, I would gleefully live the life of celibacy rather than even consider the possibility of fucking you. Thor's face fell into a scowl, and he pointed at me with one meaty finger, the other hand keeping his now unbuttoned cargo shorts from falling down. You dare to reject the gift of Odin's favorite son? As if to punctuate his point, another peal of thunder rang through the night. Your definition of gift is way different from mine, Chuckles. And if you're his favorite, I'm glad I didn't know your brothers. I really hope my knees weren't knocking together as much as my imagination said they were. Snarling, Thor clutched the ball-peen hammer that had been dangling from his shorts. You're just like the rest of them, aren't you? Sif, and Sigyn, and Ur, and Yoren, and that aloof bitch Bast, and that haughty shrew Athena. Go then! Depart my presence and never darken my door again! Not even a little bit of a problem, I said as I threw open the door and ran down the dirt path, away from the cabin and the goat, as fast as my long legs could take me. No fucking way was I staying in there. For a moment, when he grabbed his hammer, I was worried he'd try to use force. I'm fairly strong. Years of hauling air tanks around and swimming with them on your back will do wonders for your upper body strength, but I had no confidence in my ability to go one-on-one with someone that big who had thousands of years of godhood backing it up. By the time I got to Ocean Drive, I'd calmed down enough to start thinking straight, including the fact that I was 25 miles from home with no vehicle. I probably had enough of my mad automotive skills to hotwire the goat, but that would mean going back to the cabin, which was not happening ever. Whipping out my smartphone, I Googled my way to a nearby car service. They said they'd have a cab for me in 20 minutes. Just as I hit end on the phone, I jumped at another peal of thunder and a lightning strike on one of the trees about 40 feet from me. The sizzle of lightning, the crack of the tree, and the smell of burning wood all served to frighten the holy crap out of me. Then it started to rain. Of course. This was your typical Florida downpour. Intense, nasty, and immediately soaked every single thing you were wearing. Which I was stuck in for 20 minutes. These storms usually didn't last all that long, but there wasn't usually a pissed-off thunder god in the Keys either. By the time the cab arrived, my bones were wet. Then it was another half an hour to the Bottroff house. It didn't take that long to get here from Key West, but livery drivers in Chevy Avios tend to take a more leisurely pace down the overseas highway than thunder gods in sports cars. I got home at about 2 a.m., by which time the storm had finally stopped. I debated going to bed, but I knew that wouldn't work. Besides, I had a sudden need to talk to Ginny, who, based on the death glare she was throwing at the table, had some inkling of what was going to happen. And I, like a moron, hadn't paid any attention. Or at least waited until the set was over so I could get a second opinion. After changing into dry clothes and toweling down, I headed back to Mayor Fred's. My last bra was soaked through, needed to do laundry Saturday, obviously, so I wore the tank top with the built-in support cups. It wasn't the most comfortable thing in the world. Its claim to be one-size-fits-all only applies if you have a B cup or less, but it would do. I walked into Mayor Fred's just as Bobby was saying, "This is one our drummer Ginny Blake asked us to do," before diving into the opening riff of Joan Jett's I Hate Myself for Loving You. I noticed that Loki was sitting at the bar, chatting as usual with Larry St. Joseph, one of the regulars. Hell, at this point, Loki, under the name of Sigurd Jarlsson, was a regular too. As soon as he saw me, Loki gave me a similar death glare to that of Ginny and motioned for me to come over. All the tables, including my usual one by the ficus, were taken. It was the Friday night of a holiday weekend, and 1812 was really on tonight, so the turnover was slower than usual. I land-sharked through the crowd and squeezed in between Larry and Loki. The latter didn't waste any time. "Ginny told me my cousin came by and left with you." News travels fast. Yeah, he did. He said he wanted to take you on an adventure, that he was taking you to your reward for whatever deed he thought you might have performed. While the deed I performed was cleaning up your mess. Larry just stared at Loki. "What in Sam Hill did you do this time, Sig?" Loki's lips curled into a sneer. Why does everyone assume that I have done something? In this case, you did. Thor was here because of what happened last weekend. Unbelievable. Loki shook his head in disapproval, which was just hilarious. I cannot believe you simply went with him. Did you return to your inn, or did you find a remote location to have his way with you? That got me a look from Larry. Hey, I thought Rance was your young man. We're not dating, I said automatically. And that's not the point. Isn't it? Loki had gone from disapproving to mischievous. I wonder how your special agent Demetrigian would feel about you having a tryst with my cousin. First of all, it would hardly be my first tryst since I got here. Really? Larry looked a little revolted. I glared at him. Guys who stick their dicks in water elementals and get cursed by them to die when they go to sleep should not throw stones. Larry angrily grabbed his coffee, muttering, "You don't have to get personal about it. Sheesh." I turned my angry gaze back to Loki. Secondly, I didn't have a tryst. The minute he took his shirt off, I was out of there. Had to take a cab home in the rain. Loki smirked. Yes, when Thor is displeased, it tends to be reflected in the weather. Now that I'd burned through my outrage, I was starting to get worried. I'd spent most of my cab ride home wondering about the consequences of my rejection might be. Not that said consequences changed anything, but I wanted to know what to expect. So what happens now? I asked. What does Thor generally do when women reject him? Then I had an awful thought. Do women reject him? That got Loki to grin widely. All the time! Did he try the line about how when he rubs his hammer it grows larger? Larry just looked at both of us. Are you kidding me? He says that? More than once. After the Joan Jett song ended, Bobby said they were taking a break. Once more, a mess of helpful audience members aided her in getting down. But she just sat on the edge of the stage and took in the accolades of just about every person in the bar, while Adina brought her another drink. Ginny, though, came over to join me, Loki, and Larry at the bar, and she was still giving me the death glare. I cut her off before she could even get her mouth open. Don't you start! Yes, I left with Thor. Yes, he said it was an adventure and all his usual bullshit that, in retrospect, was an obvious line I should have seen through. But no, once he made it clear that his only interest was in fucking the Dees, I got the hell out of there. Good. Ginny packed a lot of relief into that one syllable. He attempted that on me after Loki was imprisoned and before the Earth Nymphs found him for me. Loki immediately went back to being outraged. He did? Oh, calm down. I refused him. He tried to convince me that Mjolnir would grow larger if I rubbed it. Larry actually did a spit take with his coffee. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, he really did say that? Ginny nodded gravely. The good news, Cassie, is that you are now one of his failed conquests and will probably never even speak to you again. Yeah, he gave me a list. Sif, Ur, Njorin, Bast, and Athena. And by the way, it's freaking me out a little bit that it's not just half the Norse pantheon running around, but that we've got Egyptian and Greek gods, too. Ginny shook her head. He and Sif were married, actually, but after he slept with some Valkyrie or other, she refused to join him in his bed. Loki chuckled. I told him he would regret sleeping with the chooser of the slain. The next day he laughed at me and said he didn't regret a thing. Then he went home. He sipped his bourbon. I did try to warn him. Ihor finally made it over to us. Ginny ordered a bourbon of her own, but I found that all the energy had drained out of me. Plus my ribs were starting to ache from the stupid tank top. Look, much as I'd love to hear more stories of Thor crashing and burning with the ladies, I think I need to head home and collapse in a heap. This night was way more draining than it should have been. I'll see you guys tomorrow night. When I got back to the B&B, I was rather surprised to find 5 people sitting on the front porch, who got up and cheered upon seeing me approach. Thank the Lord, DeAndre said. Rosita wiped imaginary sweat off her brow. Thought for damn sure we was going to be stuck in that porch all night long. I put my hands on my hips, screwing a mock stern expression on my face. Okay, I remember when I checked you guys in, I gave you a front door key. Drayvon looked at Steve with a dangerously sweet smile on her face. You want to tell Cassie about the front door key? Steve stared intently at the ground. I thought I put it in my pocket. DeAndre was shaking his head. You believe that? I couldn't help but notice that Anwan was totally checking me out. I also remembered that the tank top I was wearing, for all its discomfort, looked pretty fucking good on me. I dug into the pocket of my shorts, which had my keychain. Lucky for you guys, I had come prepared. It's also even luckier that I came home earlier. I'm usually not back here until 4. DeAndre looked at Steve and grinned. Hope you like sleeping on the floor, yo. Fuck you. I snorted at Steve's oh-so-mature response as I unlocked the front door. Then Rosita cuddled up to DeAndre. That's my job. TMI, people. Even as I spoke those words, the other three made gagging noises. I opened the door and bowed with a flourish to let them in. Your castle awaits. Keep the noise down as the other three rooms have sleeping people in them. I'm going to go to bed. See you all tomorrow at 1. The main house had 4 rooms upstairs, 3 of which were occupied by this bunch, and 2 downstairs. The 2 cottages had 2 rooms each, giving us 10 altogether, which is just the right number for a B&B with a staff of 3. Debbie, the owner, Lisa Karen, the maid, and me, the Lord High Everything Else. Oh, hey, Cass? Anwan asked as the 2 couples went inside. Can you do me a favor? I like to read before I go to bed, but the bulb's out in the lamp on the nightstand. I blew out a breath. My bed was calling my name very loudly, but, well, I was the Lord High Everything Else. I'll fetch a bulb and bring it up. Anwan followed the others upstairs. I didn't spend the entire time he went up the stairs staring at his ass, honest. I went to the storage closet, pulled out a bulb, and then went upstairs. Anwan had left his door ajar, even though I had a master key for all 10 rooms. I pushed the door the rest of the way open. Anwan had taken his shirt and flip-flops off, so he was only wearing his shorts. Remember how nice his arms were? The chest went along very nicely with him, and the light from the lamp on the nightstand shone off his bald head. I grinned. Thought the bulb was out. Yeah, I guess I was wrong. He smiled and moved closer to me. Sorry about that. That was twice in one night that I totally missed 2, in retrospect, horribly transparent attempts to get into my pants. I kicked the door shut behind me just to make it clear that this time I was okay with it. Suffice it to say that Anwan's ex is a fucking moron. Too physical, my ass. And several other of my body parts. Damn. The one negative about the whole thing was that Anwan was up before dawn. The 5 of them were taking a boat tour that left at some ungodly hour of the morning, which was any time before noon as far as I was concerned. So I stumbled in half-asleep haze to my room in one of the cottages out back. I passed through the kitchen where Debbie was preparing breakfast, and she just gave me the biggest shit-eating grin in the history of the world. Somebody had a good night. It didn't suck. Then I stopped and thought about it a second, and then added, although several things were sucked. Gotta go collapse. Anwan was hardly the first tourist I'd had a one-nighter with, and Debbie hadn't minded any of the other times. In fact, more than once she encouraged me to get laid more often. And hey, they weren't flying back to Baltimore until Sunday night, so it might even be a 2-nighter. There were a couple of positions we hadn't gotten around to yet. I did my usual routine after that. Slept till 11, drank coffee, went to see clips, ran a dive. When I got back from the dive, during which Anwan and I exchanged all kinds of coy looks to the point that Drayvon was wondering what was wrong with us, Noah, the other part-timer, had called in sick, and so I had to run his night dive. And then when I got back from that, we'd gotten a call from one of the other shops up on Sugarloaf Key that one of their boats had gone missing. The Coast Guard was alerted, of course, but like the Springsteen song says, we take care of our own. We took all 3 of our boats, Groucho, Chico, and Harpo, out to search. We spent 4 hours doing that, until the shop called back to say they found it. Turns out a couple of tourists had provided the dive master with some weed laced with something. Put them all to sleep, and they drifted. Assholes were lucky they didn't crash on a reef. The upshot is that I never made it to Mayor Fred's Saturday night, as I was too fried. I didn't even go into the main house to see if Anwan was up for round 2, mostly because I knew I wasn't. Hell, I never made it to the stage of taking my clothes off, instead just collapsing on top of my made bed. Sunday morning, I got a text from Bobby. Jaina got laid. I texted back, me too. We quickly arranged to have a late lunch at her place. After my drive, I drove up to Cow Key, where Bobby was waiting for me at one of the many picnic tables the Malevsky family had in their backyard, complete with sandwiches from her parents' store's deli section. Bobby, who knew me all too well, had gotten me beef salami with mustard and sautéed onions. She was having her usual bologna with mayo on white bread. Yes, really. Apparently being blonde-haired and blue-eyed didn't make her quite white enough. She started talking the second my butt hit the bench. Okay, on the one hand, I'm dying to find out, like, every single detail. I'm guessing that's why you didn't make it last night? Sadly, no. I told her the quickie version of what happened at Sea Cliffs. This was Friday night after I left. Bobby's eyes widened. Really? Wow. You see, I started, but she cut me off, waving her hand back and forth. Later. Seriously. Jane has been my best friend for 20 years, so she goes first. I laughed. Okay, fine. So this guy comes in. Big guy. Seriously. I've seen bouncers that can fit in this guy's left arm. He spends about half a second hitting on me. I snorted. While living on one of the more hedonistic islands on the face of the earth, Bobby was asexual. She wasn't interested in sex with anybody, regardless of gender. She usually told men that she was into women, and women that she was into men, just to shut them up sooner. We won't even get into the people who wanted to fix her. And then he went after Jaina. Followed her outside where she was smoking, and then did it again the next break. She went off with him. Ginny was kind of pissed, because she didn't really help with the teardown, but ever since Russ... I nodded as Bobby trailed off. Until Russ, Jaina had never not had a boyfriend, but in the months since, she hadn't even evinced an interest in any of the legion of guys who hit on her. Of course, many of them had, like this guy, tried Bobby first, as she's less scary looking. They never hit on Ginny. It's like she had goddess mojo or something. I kept meaning to ask her how she did that. Anyhow, this guy was really into her. Was telling her about this adventure they... Oh, fuck. Did he have short red hair and a thick-ass beard and a hammer on his belt? Bobby choked on her sandwich. Seriously? You know this guy? I put my head in my hands. Fuck. Ginny was not pissed because Jaina didn't do teardown. And then I explained to Bobby about Thor. I'm kind of surprised Ginny didn't tell you Friday. Yeah, well... Bobby looked away, and I swear she was blushing. What is it? Well, I was a little busy Friday. Everyone was trying to talk to me. I threw up both hands. Well, duh, woman! You were on fuego Friday night. God, you really did get laid if you're whipping out the Spanish. That got me slightly annoyed. Excuse me? Remember that construction worker over 4th of July weekend? Next day you called him muy bueno. I had no recollection of this. Really? And then there was that grad student you spent all of Memorial Day weekend babbling about poetry with? After he flew back to Michigan, you were talking about his cojones. And, all right. I really didn't need every one-nighter since I moved down here thrown in my face. Let's get back to Jaina. If she went off with Thor... I trailed off, realizing I had no idea how to finish that sentence. Fuck, I only know about women who rejected him. Ginny and Loki didn't tell me a damn thing about anyone he actually stayed with. Then I remembered something Ginny said. Okay, no, wait. He was married to one, but she left him when he cheated on her. Bobby was rubbing her chin. Well, wait a minute. Remember what Russ's mom said? That Jaina would never love anyone like she loved Russ again? And since then, she's been as celibate as I am, and I know she hates that. Maybe a god can overcome a water-phase curse. I took a thoughtful bite of my sandwich. Never know. I grinned. And hey, now I can ask Jaina if his hammer really does get bigger if you rub it. Unfortunately, I didn't make it to Mayor Fred's until much later that night. A boat from the shop on Sugarloaf went missing again, and we volunteered to help again, and then it turned up again, only this time it was the Coast Guard who found it. My instinct was to drive back to the B&B and collapse, but I noticed 2 texts on my smartphone. One was from Anwan. You made the trip. Thanks for helping me forget, bitch. The other was from Bobby. Come to Mayor Fred's. Doesn't matter how late. Trust me. Thus intrigued, I slammed Rocinante into gear and headed back to the Botroff house, parking the truck, and then walking the rest of the way to Mayor Fred's. By the time I got there, it was almost 4, and Jaina was standing outside the bar, puffing away alongside Larry. Hey, Zukov. Hey, yourself. Guess I missed the show, huh? Larry blew smoke into the night air. They weren't as good as Friday, but they brought the house down anyhow. Bobby said you had some sort of crisis at Seacliffs? I nodded. Boat went missing from one of the other shops. A shop that may not be in business much longer if this shit keeps up, since that's the second night in a row it's happened. I regarded Jaina with significant concern. You okay? Yeah, I'm good. Jaina used her usual goth, studied indifference tone, which was actually the best possible news, since she tended toward defensive and annoyed since Russ and his mother left the island. I heard you hooked up last night. Larry made a face, dropped his cigarette, and stepped on it. I'm getting out of here. Good night. He wandered off down Green Street to do whatever he did whenever Mayor Fred's wasn't open, and he was guzzling caffeine at the bar so he wouldn't sleep and therefore die. Jaina gave me a look. Hooked up? Seriously? Sorry. And I meant it. I didn't hate the phrase as much as Jaina did, but it was close. I just wanted to get rid of Larry. She snorted. I get that. So you want to know about Thor? Just want to make sure you're all right. I'm fine. She shrugged. I mean, he wasn't exactly what you'd expect from a god, you know? My eyes went wide, and a feeling of giddiness came over me. Really? Oh, yeah. He told me his hammer got bigger if I rubbed it. It didn't. And neither did any other part of him. I burst out laughing, and Jaina joined me. Seriously, she went on. He had the technique of a fucking 16-year-old who just touched his first boobie. And was over in half a second. She grinned. Kind of like lightning. She finished her cigarette and dropped it on the sidewalk. He's inside, you know, talking with Jarlson or Loki or whatever the fuck his name is. Keeps smiling at me like we're fucking soulmates or some shit. I pointed at the entrance with the big fish over it. They're still inside? Even Larry's left. And he's the last one out, usually. Go fig. I walked in just as Chet and his white woman fuck buddy du jour left. Ginny was packing her drum stuff, and Bobby was sitting on the edge of the stage with a pint of beer, her guitar case next to her. Ihor was cleaning off a table when he saw me, and looked incredibly relieved. Oh, Cass, thank Christ you're here. You think you can get these two out of here? He jerked his thumb toward the bar, where Thor and Loki were both talking and laughing. The former had very few consonants, and the latter was even more braying. They were the only people left in the bar besides Ihor, me, and the band. I regarded Ihor. How drunk are they? Ihor just shot me a look of disgust, and I held up both hands. I walked over to the bar, and I heard Thor slur, That is settled! We shall soldier into Hollywood and find these varlets, Hempston and Hillsworth, and smite them! Loki swung his arm down as if to pound on the bar, but he missed. Undaunted, he cried out, Yes! We are in agreement, then! I put a hand on each of their shoulders. Okay, Jay, Silent Bob, it's time to leave. Nonsense, Loki cried. It's still early. It's 4, Sigurd. Even Larry's gone home. Loki frowned, trying very hard to process this. Larry's left? I nodded. Loki swung his head to look at Thor. If Larry's left, then the tavern's definitely closed. Bah! Thor actually succeeded in slamming his hand on the table. I am the Thunderer, and I demand more ale! Demand all you want. You're not getting it. Thor stared at me as if recognizing me for the first time, which, to be honest, he probably was. Cassie? What are you doing here? How dare you talk to me after you rejected me? As I recall, Thunderer, 2 nights ago, you swore you were going to rip Loki's entrails out and strangle him with them. Thor almost fell off the bar stool. Did I? I nodded again. Loki pointed at him. It certainly sounds like something you'd say, cousin. Thor considered that. Yes, it does. But what's the point in holding grudges, that's what I say. Come, Cassie, join us for a drink. Can't, Thor. The bar's closed. Look, we could... Nonsense! Thor clambered off the stool and then fell face first to the floor. I managed to dodge out of the way just in time, and I swear the entire bar shook when he hit the hardwood. He didn't move. I bent down over him just as Loki did the same, and our heads collided. I saw stars as my skull hit his, and I fell backward. Next thing I knew, Ginny and Ihor were on either side of me as I sat on the floor about a foot from where Thor fell. What happened? Ginny pointed at Loki, who I now realized was out cold on the floor behind the Thunder God. The immovable object met a very resistible force. I snorted and clambered to my feet. Ihor moved up to help me, but I was up before he could do anything. He shrugged, and his chivalrous instinct, having already been stymied by my independent streak, folded his arms and stared at the 2 unconscious gods on his floor. What the fuck am I supposed to do with those 2? I have a few creative suggestions, I said, slowly, before Ginny cut me off. I will take care of them. Thor's chariot has a mind of its own, and it will take us to wherever he's living. It's a cabin on Summerland Key. From the stage where she had just finished packing her synthesizers, Jaina added, It's a shithole! It took the combined efforts of me, Ihor, and Ginny to drag Thor to the sidewalk, but Ihor was able to handle Loki alone. By the time the bartender got the trickster out front, the goat had shown up of its own accord and was again idling in front of the bar. Really was hoping not to see that car again. I shook my head and grabbed Thor's ankles while Ihor went for one shoulder and Ginny the other. As we strained to pick him up, I said through clenched teeth, I'm telling you right now, whatever doesn't fit the first time, I'm cutting off! This time I actually had my dive knife with me, so I could back up my claim. However, we got him into the back, and then tossed Loki on top of him. Ginny then hopped into the driver's seat. Neither Jaina nor I actually told her where the cabin was on Summerland, and she didn't seem to have a set of keys, but she somehow guided the goat away. Whatever. I may have been a deist, but the gods' problems were not mine. Some days, I even believed that. Ihor and I walked back into the bar, and he said, "Want a beer on the house? Taps are shut down, but I can give you a bottle." I was a beer snob, and the idea of drinking out of a bottle was not appealing. On the other hand, my father always used to say that it's free, it tastes better. Yeah. Ihor went to get me a beer. Bobby, for some stupid reason, was grinning ear to ear as she sat by the stage. "What are you so fucking happy about?" "Well, remember how Thor said he would give you a reward?" I wondered where she was going with this. "Yeah?" "He succeeded." He looked at Jaina, who was hopping off the stage. "With both of you." "What the unholy fuck, Barbara Ann?" Bobby glowered at the use of her hated first name, which was why Jaina used it, before continuing. "It's simple, Jane Ann." Jaina scowled. Thor showing up when he did got Cassie out of the bar, and then led directly to her going back to the Botroff house early, which led equally directly to her fucking that guy's brains out. I held up a hand, which Ihor then put a bottle of beer in. "Thanks, Ihor. To be fair, and one did a pretty good, nice job removing my cranial matter via intercourse, too." "So noted." Bobby nodded. "But because Cassie so brutally rejected Thor, he came back to the bar and tried for someone else who was around when his dad died. He struck out with me, but got Jaina, who hasn't been intimate with a man in months." "Not much of a man," Jaina muttered. "More of a man than you've had since Russ, though." Jaina nodded. "Yeah, okay, it was good to be back in the saddle, even if I did got thrown in 2 seconds. I gave Jaina a mock solemn look. "Careful, Jaina. Using a rodeo metaphor may get your goth card revoked." "We don't have cards, Zukov." Jaina then modulated her tone from pissed to amused. "They just cut off our supply of eyeliner for 6 months." We all chuckled, and then Ihor clapped his hands. "Okay, enough hilarity. I really want to close this fucking place." Jaina nodded. "I'll go get the van." Bobby stared at me. "Help me up?" I dashed over to her, setting my beer bottle on the table, and then holding out an arm. She grabbed it and used it as a brace to pull herself upright. I snatched her crutches and handed them over and picked up her guitar. We headed toward the exit. "Thanks, Bobby. I was really kind of pissed tonight, but you put it all in perspective. And after kicking ass all weekend." "Hey, it's what friends are for." Bobby's smile fell. "Now, though, I just want to sleep until Thursday." Emphatically, I said, "Amen." That was God of Blunder. Thor continues to be a supporting character in subsequent Cassie stories. He's in 7 Mile Race and Behind the Wheel, which I will be reading at some point in the future. And also, there's a story that I still have to write. It's been crowdfunded. I just have to fit it into my schedule. It's called Ragnarok and a Hard Place, which will not only feature Thor and Loki, and also Odin, even though he's dead, and also another god who will be introduced in one of the upcoming stories. You'll see. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. You can find me online at DeCandido.net. Read my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. There is a pinned post that leads you to a guide to all of the Cassie Zukov stories, so you can track them all down. That's at the top of the blog. And then you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/KRAD. Among the many things you can get there for supporting me, for $10 a month, you can get a monthly vignette featuring my original characters, including, so far, I believe, 8 Cassie vignettes. So please check that out, and please stay safe.